Welcome back to FEG with Mohammed Ben Siamar. We speak about Sharia law and fiqh. Fiqh, it means jurisprudence. Um, the religious sciences. The religious sciences developed mainly in the new cultural centers such as Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo. You know, Cordoba is in Spain, Baghdad is in Iraq, and Cairo is in Egypt, who provided a highly creative, pluralistic milieu of the rise of a rich civilization. Comprehensive achievement in philosophy, theology, literature, and science began in the 8th century and continued in different parts of the Muslim world well into the 17th century. A major branch of the religious sciences deals with jurisprudence. Do you know jurisprudence? You understand it? Jurisprudence is it's about fiqh law. The theological and systematic aspect of law. Islam is a religion more of action than of abstract speculation about belief. The first and most important religious science aiming at right living as the essence of faith is Islamic law. Inner personal submission to the will of God is God's way for all of humankind. At both the personal and societal level, Islam as a faith and a way of life is to be realized within the framework of divine law. The Sharia is the law, synonym of law. And we said before that the Sharia of Islam, there is a lot of similitude between the Sharia law and Jewish law or Nawahid law. Lots of things they are together. They like each other. A way of so the Sharia, a way of life or conduct based on set of moral imperatives. Within Arabia, the Quran and the life example Sunnah of the Prophet and his generation, guided Muslim life and piety. These two sources emerged as the framework for the wider Islamic society. Islamic jurisprudence developed in a reciprocal relationship with the interpretation of the Quran and the study of the Hadith. Hadith, they are the words of the Prophet, the sentences that he said, which means traditions that report the word and actions of the Prophet. Since the compilation of the Quran was arranged mechanically according to the order of the surahs. Surahs, they are chapters, and like you know, there are 114 chapters. It was important for jurists to place the various revelations in their historical context. The Quranic science developed for this purpose is known as a knowledge of the occasions of the revelation. Asbab al-Nuzul, in Dutch, de omstandigheden van de nederdaling, occasions of the revelation, of the surah and the verses of the sacred text. Hadith traditions were informally remembered and passed on for at least a century before any attempts were made to record them, because Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, has forbidden for his people to write down his words, his ahadith. But after a century, 2 centuries after, come attempts were made to record them. Hadith tradition was not fully codified until the 10th century for the Sunni community. They are codified in one codex, and at least a century later for the Imami Shia school. In Arabic, a learned person is called an alim, like scientist, but religious scientist, of course. The plural ulama, scientists, refers to the religious legal scholars or religious intellectuals of the Islamic world as a group. Quranic Principles for society. The Quranic principles teaching is centrally concerned with relating individuals and societies to God. Islam has not official priesthood. Every person is responsible not only for his or her own moral behavior, but also for the moral reform of the entire Muslim Ummah, the community. Kindness and respect towards parents are placed next in importance to the worship of God. Through the zakat, welfare religious tax, and sadaqah, voluntary almsgiving, care to the poor and needy is made a social responsibility and a meritorious act. Usury is strictly forbidden as a mean of increasing one's wealth. Harsh punishments are stipulated for offenses which are considered as grave transgressions of the bounds of social conduct set by God. The Quran does not promulgate absolute laws, even when it strictly demands severe punishment for transgressors. It is more concerned with moral issues in actual situation. Among its over 6,000 verses, no more than 200 are explicitly legislative. So Quran don't speak a lot about legislacy. Legislacy comes later with the scholars. Just among 6,000 verses and more than 70,000 words, just only 200 verses are explicitly legislative. On the whole, the Quran points the way to a good and righteous life and leaves the details of how this goal is to be achieved to those who strive to attain proper understanding of the religious. See Quran 9:122. So be the Sunnah of the Prophets, and I will stop here to give you opportunity to ask questions. The Prophet's Sunnah includes his actions and his tacit consent. In situations where he neither approved nor objected, his silence is taken to signify approval. So Muhammad, if somebody asks him and he don't react, he don't answer, this silence is all taken as approval. This Sunnah of consent became a normative source in the development of Islamic law. Besides the Sunnah of action, the Sunnah is action. But the whole Sunnah is hadith, his words and also actions. Action and the Sunnah of consent, there is the Sunnah of speech, the Prophet saying or hadith, which must go back to an eyewitness of the event. The hadith literature is often called tradition. It is the most important of three elements of Sunnah because it most directly expresses the Prophet's opinion or judgments. Prophetic tradition of or hadith. As source for law, the prophetic hadith tradition is in some ways parallel to the oral Torah in Judaism. Hadith consists of a chain of transmissions, isnad, beginning with the compiler or last transmitter and going back to the Prophet, followed by the next matan, the text called matan, and the transmission called isnad, the people who transmitted the matan transmitted the text, they called isnad. The aim of the study of hadith is to ascertain the authenticity of a hadith by establishing the completeness of the chain of its transmission and the veracity of the transmitters. Hadith that has three or more component chains of transmission is considered sound hadith, sahih, and universally accepted mutawatir. Sound means sahih and accepted means mutawatir. A hadith with only one chain of transmission is considered sound some hadith are considered as good or weak, or even fabricated, depending on the veracity of its transmitters. The most important Sunni hadith traditionalists are Muhammad ibn Ismail Bukhari, died 850 from the city of Bukhara in Central Asia. Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj al-Nisaburi, died 875 from Nisapur in Iran. They are said to have collected hundreds of thousands of hadith, out of which they selected about 3,000. Their two collections entitled Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim soon achieved canonical status, second to Quran. Although the Sahih of Muslim is better organized and methodologically superior to that of al-Bukhari, the latter obtained the first place among all hadith collections. Other collections are those of Abu Dawud, As-Sistani, or Ash-Shistani, died 889, Ibn Majah, At-Tirmidhi, died 892, and An-Nasa'i, who were also from Central Asia and Iran. They were all not Arabs. Their works are entitled Sunan, the plural of Sunnah, combining the Sunnahs of action, of consent, and of speech. The 6 canonical collections are legal manuals that deal first with the laws governing the rituals for worship, and then with laws regulating the social, political, and economic life of the community. Now I ended with the course of today. It was short, but I think a lot of information. Next week I will speak about Islamic law more further. I thank you for your watching, Derek, Dominic, Derek, and Javis. If you have a question, you may ask them